Hi, guys. So we're preparing for our next episode of Pam and the Purple Couch. But what are we going to be talking about? Generalization. Now, what is generalization? It could be learning to eat. It could be learning to speak, learning to play games, learning to listen. How about following 1-2-step directions? All of these things that we are teaching our children need to be what we call generalized. Now, what does that mean? It means that if mom or dad tell little Johnny or little Susie to do something, if grandma and granddad say the same thing, will Johnny or Susie listen? If the teacher tells your child to please sit down and get his notebook out, but yet when he gets home and you tell him to sit down and do his homework, he looks at you like you're crazy. Well, that's the word generalize. We need to make sure that your child, your grandchild, your niece, your nephew, the one that you love, can listen to those directions regardless of who's giving them. So it may be me, it may be Manny, maybe Missy. Who knows? It may be you giving those directions. We want to make sure your child knows how to follow through, no matter who tells them how to follow the line. So come on back and we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to generalize your loved one.
Welcome to Pam and the Purple Couch podcast, hosted by Pamela Furr, with our co-hosts Dr. Manny Rodriguez, Missy Owen, and Loki DePristo. Together, we're going to dive deep into topics such as education, neurodiversity, autism, and applied behavioral analysis. Remember to click subscribe today so you don't miss out on any future episodes.
Hi, friends and families, and welcome back to Pam and the Purple Couch podcast. Today, we are going to change things up. I'm going to be the mom today, and we're going to talk some clinical terms. We're going to talk about generalization. So I put Missy in the hot seat today, and we've got Dr. Manny here with us just so that we can bring the clinical side of our house to yours. So generalization, guys, you know, we talk about that. They've heard us use that term. And I gave them a little bit of a feeler of what's coming in this episode. But we really want to get to our caregivers and our loved ones and explain what is generalization, why it is so important, and why you will hear that, whether it's your speech, OT, ABA, or even when we're looking at our classroom settings. If we're looking at a general ed class versus a self-contained class or a smaller class. You know, we need to educate our loved ones, our caregivers with these terms, because I know as a mom, that first IEP meeting that I was at, there were terms being used, there were initials, and, you know, even in ABA, applied behavioral analysis, we have a different ABC alphabet soup.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's funny, you type in ABA and it's the American Bar Association
Every
that comes
time.
up, you know. So we're not in the legal house, we're in the clinical house. And so can you both share with our audience what is generalization in your terms for each one? And then an example that we can give our families of why this is important and how we can start opening up these different pathways for our parents.
So I can start with the definition of it, and I'll throw it to Manny for some examples with that one. So with generalization, we're talking about a skill gets generalized. So we always say that we want any skill that we teach our kiddos to generalize across 3 different things. I like to call them the nouns, just to keep it easy. So I want to generalize across different environments, different people, and different stimuli. So that's going to be our person, place, thing. Essentially a noun.
Okay, so when we're talking about what their stimuli, things along those lines, give them some examples. Because again, that's a term that we're used to, but our families aren't. So what is that item? What is that thing?
So it can be anything. For example, shoe, shoe, shoe. I can say, yes, this is a shoe. I want to teach a kiddo, this is a shoe. When you see a shoe, label it. But also that is a shoe. Also that's a shoe. They all look totally different sizes, colors, shapes, but they're all still a shoe. So that's an example of a skill. So my skill set in this example, I'm labeling shoe. I want this to generalize across different stimuli. So different examples of what a shoe could be.
So for our viewers that are listening and not able to see this, what Missy is talking about is I have a wedge sandal on. for those of you all that like shoes. She has got a sneaker, a slip-on sneaker on. And then Manny has a men's, more of a dress shoe on.
Yep.
So these are all still considered shoes.
Shoes.
Yeah.
Wear them on our feet, not on our hands.
But a lot of our
Yep.
children
Yeah.
are very specific.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
this I want to say probably, oh my gosh, about 20 years ago. Because if I'm thinking Loki's 19, so about 20 years ago. A good example that I was given was in an adult situation. Was trying to explain autism to an adult. Never been diagnosed, but how was the clinical psychologist explaining to me how to explain to an adult with autism? And they used an apple. Same thing, the stimuli is that we have an apple. Is it red? Is it green? Is it yellow? And we put the apple on top of our head. So the student has got the apple on top of their head. Well, what color is the apple? It's red. It's a red apple. So then I take the apple down and I put a green apple on top of their head. And I don't say anything. I say, well, what color is the apple? It's red. Because there's no other thing but a red apple.
Yeah.
So there aren't any green apples. There aren't any yellow apples. So this is another way for us to describe generalization. Because we still have the apple. And as we all know as adults, there's multiple color apples. Just like there's different types
flavors,
of shoes, you know.
Well, and that's a great example of why we do generalization. So, labeling or identifying shoes is one thing, right? But labeling, identifying food is a skill we want to generalize, because what if it was a black apple? What if it was something that looked like an apple, but it wasn't quite an apple?
Tomato.
It's a tomato, or it's something that possibly could be poisonous.
Yes.
Right. So that's why that skill of identifying, labeling at such a young age is so important as they grow older, because then they can generalize it to other things so that they can identify whether it is or it is not that. Another one that I like to do with parents that are still kind of struggling with this is think of like red light, green light, yellow light.
Oh,
This is pretty much universally applied. What is red light? If you're driving a car, it means stop. What's green light? It means go. What's yellow light? Depending on where
Go very
right?
fast.
So, but that from the lexicon of like all things we learn as human beings, that one is pretty universally applied no matter where you are in the world. And that's pretty cool. So that means it's generalized. That learning from a young age as a teenager, when you're learning how to drive, or even as a younger kid, when you're in the back seat and watching mom and dad drive, you've learned what red, yellow, and green mean in terms of an action.
I love that, because I think about while you're talking about driving in the car, we go on auto drive, you know, and we work on that, especially in staying in the present moment. But while we're driving, we think about that. But do we really think about our passengers? And a lot of times it is our children. It's our children or our loved ones. And think about all of the information being downloaded in the car that you are not paying any attention to.
Yeah.
You know,
I like to point it out.
Oh, yes, they do.
Yeah.
I can think of one of ours.
Or repeat what's being said in a car.
Correct.
You know?
As you slam on the brakes,
Yeah.
or as you go through the drive-through and someone isn't moving as fast, because we hear that in the classroom. So that's a great, just to take a pause to remember that not only are your children following and reading the signs and the traffic signs and watching you drive, but also your patterns of behavior while you're driving, how you're interacting with other drivers, road rage.
Well, and I was going to use road rage as an example, before I do that. So when it comes to generalization, something I always thought was really cool learning in grad school was the whole purpose of generalization and even talking about it is a skill set. We're trying to train a skill set. And so thinking about in terms of our early learners, one that comes to mind, you mentioned in the preview of this, is following instructions, right? Teaching a kid to follow a basic 1-step, 2-step instructions.
Yeah, stand up, sit down, come here.
So generalization would say, okay, can they generalize that across the nouns, the person, place, or environments? Well, what about an adult following instructions from a boss, right?
Yeah.
Or an adult following instructions from a customer.
Absolutely.
Right? Or if you're a mechanic, learning how to follow instructions of how to repair something.
Absolutely.
So all of that skill, it sounds simplistic, following instructions, but when you extrapolate it in terms of adult's, it means so much.
Oh, yeah, because you have the instructions you hear, the ones you read, that you watch on camera.
Exactly. And it's all general. And that's why we do generalization. And that's why it's so powerful. On the flip side, one of the things that we've talked about is just because something can be generalized doesn't mean it's always going to be readily accepted.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So road rage was the thing that came to my mind as we were talking about a car, right? I have a family member who will go unnamed that has demonstrated an extreme amount of road rage for all sorts of things, being cut off, being flicked off, or whatever. But road rage in some countries is an absolute taboo no-no. You don't do it.
Right.
It can get you arrested. Where here in the United States, I think we almost, to a default, readily accept it.
No, I agree with this.
Yeah.
But especially because of our traveling, Manny, some of that in the Middle East, well, absolutely not would be accepted. Some of the things that we see, especially, again, we are in the United States and we love our country and we take for granted the freedoms that we do have.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But even down to flicking someone off, when, that wonderful, how are you doing? Our favorite U.S. hand wave, things along those lines. But also our kids pick up on that.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have a student that we had to have a talk with a very alpha mom about where this language came from. And, couldn't be in our household, couldn't at all. And what was happening was she had severe road rage, especially in the McDonald's drive-thru. And so the stimuli, he's waiting for his chicken nuggets. And when mom is yelling and using profanity to talk to the person that's not moving in front of her, and when he comes back in the office and he's like telling the teacher, well, why aren't you moving, you fat ass? And she's like, well, I didn't say that. Well, guess where that came from.
Yeah.
Just a moment in the drive-thru getting those chicken nuggets, and our kids love those chicken nuggets.
Oh, yes, they do. That and the French fries.
Yes. And it doesn't matter what store they're from. It is a universal language. That's generalization.
Well, and something you're hitting on that I think is important for people to kind of key in on is, when we talk in ABA, when we talk in applied behavior analysis in terms of generalization, we're really focusing on skills we want to generalize.
Yes.
So inadvertently, there are things that people learn that generalize that we did not mean to generalize, right? Like cursing or road rage or things like that.
Oh, my goodness.
They're still learning the skill, but that doesn't mean we want them to generalize that into situations.
Yeah.
So,
potty language. It's a number one in the household, and then it's learned behavior.
Right.
And then do we generalize this in understanding where and when it is appropriate? No, we just do it everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a really good one for us to
and there is
into.
So to kind of switch it a little bit, but there is a lot of research too that shows, kind of like Manny was saying, we want skills to generalize, especially with ABA. We typically teach skills in a clinic setting. All the research consistently will show that the skills taught in clinic setting don't easily generalize to the natural environment. So we actually had an example of this with a big abduction prevention study we did back in 2021.
Yeah, this was fabulous.
Yeah.
Tell them about it, because Missy was wonderful. She had, in our academic setting, you hear stranger danger all the time. And we can teach our kids in the school, just like all the public schools do. At the private school, we do this as well at Puzzle Box. And we want to make sure that our students, because again, we have a demographic of neurodivergent students who desperately want friends and acceptance.
Yep.
So friends and acceptance and that desire and need can also cause you to make rushed decisions on whether or not this person is really a friend or foe. Well, Missy doubled down and you presented this material, didn't you? Did you send it in?
Actually,
you need to get this out.
I need to. I did. I honestly did
So
nothing
I'm
with
going
it.
to tell you, here's the alpha female one. You need to get this out because the results were scary. So tell our viewers what you did to see whether or not stranger danger in the school environment versus natural environment truly was effective practice.
Yeah, so what we did, so we taught all the kids in our clinic setting. It was over the summer, so no academics at the time, so we had a lot of free time. So we taught them abduction prevention. So basically, we taught them 3 simple steps. If someone comes up to you and asks you to leave and you don't know who they are, you say no or you yell, run, walk away, and then go and tell a trusted adult what happened. So we taught them those 3 basic steps, and then we taught them across 4 types of lures. So one was the basic, like, hey, come here, kid. Just very general. One was more authoritative. Hey, your mom called me. She said to come with me. We need to go meet her. She's stuck in traffic or she's stuck at work. One was an incentive. It's like, hey, I have a really cool iPad in my car. I can't figure out how to turn it on. Do you want to come check it out and you can play games with me? And the last one was a help lure, which this one got a lot of the kids the help. It's like, oh, my arm is so tired. This box is really heavy. Hey, man, you look like you have muscles. Can you help me carry this to my car real quick?
I'm having flashbacks as she's saying that, of Generation Xers growing up with the white van and the candy bars.
Yeah.
And then Silence of the Lambs just popped up right in my head because these are things that, our generation grew up. It was a very real threat.
Scary stuff. Yeah.
And I think we don't focus on this as much, but we still need to because adult and child trafficking is a huge problem worldwide. So we need to make sure that this is being taught.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So now you went through.
Yep.
You tell, show, do.
Yep.
All the way through in our learning environment, in the school environment. So what happened? How did you try to see if this generalized? Give me some more insight on this.
Yep. So we taught all the kids in the clinic setting across, like I said, the 4 lures, the 3 steps that they follow. All the kids mastered it. They knew exactly what to do. So with that, I should add in, we taught them to memorize a trusted person's list. So this was a list created by the parent or the caregiver that, hey, anyone on this list, safe to go with. So typically it was mom, dad, maybe aunt, uncle, close family friend. Anyone not on this list, you do not go with them. It does not matter. It's like myself. I work with these kids every day. I see them every day. I was on no one's list. So you don't go with me. It doesn't matter. Miss Pam, you weren't on Mr. Manny. None of us were on anyone's list. You don't go with us. Because that was something as well when I came up with this abduction prevention. A lot of the research showed that a true stranger abduction is less than 1% of the time. Typically, there's some relation. It may be, a substitute teacher, that person you saw down the street, someone who worked on your neighbor's lawn. There's some connection. So what we did to try to make it as realistic as possible, when we would go on field trips, we would have parent volunteers come and attempt one of the lures to get the kids to go with them. So that way it was someone, the kids all saw this person. They knew who it was. Like, oh, yeah, that's Johnny's mom. Oh, that's Billy's dad. So we'd have them approach the kiddos. So within the clinic setting, let's say we had 7 to 9 kids participate. In the clinic setting, 100% they mastered. They could tell us the steps. They got it right every single time. When we went on the field trips, I want to say we did 5 or 6. Only on one field trip on one time did a kid get 100%.
Wow.
That they said no, yelled, ran, walked away, and then told someone. Besides that, all of them failed.
Guys, that's scary.
Wow.
Did not generalize.
Caregivers, moms, dads, this is real data, real life scenarios, and understanding. I want to take a couple steps backwards. 1, getting the trusted list with your kids is so important. When you look at that list, make sure that you sit down. Some of our kids, it doesn't need to be a written list. Use photos of those loved ones, grandma, aunt, sister, mom, dad, best friend, whoever is in your acceptable group. Make sure those children know facial recognition, name recognition, because what if you are in an emergency situation? You also want the kid to be able to explain, this is Dr. Manny. He is my uncle. He is my mom's brother, and he's okay. But you need to do that. And that takes coaching. That takes, again, tell, show, do steps, reinforcing that with your child. This isn't something you just do overnight and think one time and they've got it nailed. The other part that I love hearing was that we used our own parents. So the data of watching your child that you've already went over all this information, but then watching how easily they leave with little Sally's mom or dad. Or if that's teacher. Not a wake-up call, that's the scariest thing as a parent. Can you imagine any of us sitting here and getting a call? So I can tell you there was a situation that I had happen. My goodness. I was at ABAI. And of course, we have a split family. So Loki's biological father sent his girlfriend to pick Loki up. And so you can imagine, well, he's not on the list, all the panic, everything, and I'm out of the state. So it is a terrifying situation, so we need to make sure that these skills, and that's great when we're talking so generalization here. You need to make sure that no matter what environment, what if they're at the Target? What if they're at the Walmart and they've lost your hand? They need to then know what is the right person to go to.
That's right.
Who's the authority person? You know,
Oh, a whole safety package of skills to be taught all at once.
Oh my goodness. And we do. And this is another thing. And I think about this because, you know, we go through the elections, we go through personal choice, we go through expression, but safety is a universal. So when we're talking about generalizing this needs to matter whether you're in school, whether you're at home, whether you're at the grocery store, whether you're at the park, at the beach. So quickly we could close our eyes and our kid get away from us.
Yeah. Well, and you can also, there's a couple of safety things that a lot of generalization research goes into, like gun safety. Right.
Yep.
So
that's where I took a lot of the research from.
Yeah, University of South Florida comes to mind. They've done a great deal of research around teaching kids and teenagers about what to do when you see when you're in the presence of a gun. You know, but the other one that I think is almost like has counter generalization is when we're young kids and we're taught the skill of looking both ways before crossing a street.
Okay.
And then fast forward in adulthood, the number of people that jaywalk.
Oh,
The vast majority of adults that jaywalk, if you ask them, did you ever learn to look both ways before crossing a street or look for the walk side? They'll all say yes. The vast majority of people in this world will say yes. When I was a young kid, I was taught blah, 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 safety. And yet they still jaywalk. And there's a lot of reasons from an ABA perspective why, right? It's faster. I don't have to wait. I get to where I got to go.
These are all the behavioral stuff.
Yeah, they're all, all behavioral reasons. And yet it's still a skill that they did learn, but did not generalize.
That they're now choosing to actively not engage in.
Right. They got all this reinforcement to go do that jaywalking.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of it's a strange phenomenon, but it teaches us that life lesson that it is, when it comes to safety, you know, try to work on those skills to generalize. Does it always generalize?
Now, oftentimes you have to actually experience that negative consequence, and then you're like, okay, that's why that's a rule.
Well,
but sometimes you don't want to do that.
Some pluses coming for you. And for our caregivers and loved ones out there. Number one, I want to take a moment to say, if you're enjoying this podcast, please take a second just to like and share and subscribe. That way, especially with the information I'm about to drop, you are the first to know when we're getting ready to drop some new information. So why do I bring that? So we're talking about this. So how do you protect the child and put them in the environment without putting them at risk? So we're talking about walking across the street. So how do we teach a child to generalize walking across the street, looking both ways without putting them in danger? So soon, guys, I'm already working on it. We have got a gentleman that is out in Colorado who thought about this exact same problem. And so he has worked in a virtual stimulation where in the VR, we can actually put the child through these challenges in a VR simulation.
That's cool.
So that you can practice them and reinforce them without the child actually putting themselves in danger. So I'll have more information on that coming soon. We're already in the works. It was one of the benefits of going to the conference out in Arizona. So when Craig came back, he came back with some of these items that they've been working on for our older kids that can't live independently because they've never learned those skills. So we're going to have that coming up on one of our episodes, but I'm just working out it in the process. But while you're talking about it today, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Oh, perfect
if
timing.
This is not the timing to help, because we do want to introduce our children to those things and to those environments, but there's also a risk. Manny, I think about you and I when we started the high school. If you remember, we had 12-year-old, 13-year-old never used a knife before. Ever.
Not to cut anything.
Never.
Anything.
Mom was too afraid. And they're like, we don't give him a knife. And I'm like, yeah, but if you never do it, how's he going to learn it? At least it's in a safe environment with you. And sometimes it's our parents that need to know it's okay.
Get over the fear.
Exactly. We also had a student that had a physical deformity. And so the parents just never thought he could do it. Yeah, well, you understand, I went to the butcher and was like, well, hey, you got one of them gloves so that he can't cut his hand? So we got one of the steel mitt gloves. And he was our cutter for a whole year, because he had never been given the ability or the chance, I should say, because he could do it. He just needed to build the confidence in himself. And he was able to learn strategies to use his hand as a base to guide. So these are all little things, that we come to the core of giving the opportunity to our kid.
Right.
Not just to the kid, but to the parents, like you said.
Oh, yeah.
When we talk about food choices and generalization. I have a flashback and I started laughing. I was like, oh, Pam. And I'm sure parents, you all have had it, okay? I was probably 5, 6 years old. I loved grapes. Oh, my goodness. And I'm talking about black grapes when the seeds were still in them. Loved grapes.
I feel in your teeth.
Uh-huh. Well, hold on. My nanny had put black olives out.
Oh.
Well, again, and guys, our kids will do this to you. They looked like grapes. I didn't think anything of it. I ate the whole bowl before anybody even sat down at the table because I thought they were grapes. So, as kids are running as you're preparing the meal, I just ate those grapes as we were going. So when we sat down, there were plenty of green olives. And for me, again, generalization, black olives were not olives. No, those were grapes.
Right.
So I ate all of them. I left all the green olives. And don't you know, to this day, I hate olives. I hate olives.
So it
Wow.
did not generalize.
It didn't.
No.
But it was in my head. Now, what if my mom would have known? She should have reinforced that, oh, well, you like these black olives as much as the grapes and give them both to me. And then reinforce that. But instead, she didn't have that knowledge. And here I am, almost 50 years old. And I'm like, nope, I won't eat an olive. Not at all. But yet I destroyed those black olives. And my family, they've never forgot it. Because, of course, little Nikki's like, no, I don't eat olives. But
I had that one time, though.
Yeah, one time you did. But we've got to remember our kids do that to us
Oh,
all the time. It's the same thing with eating the green vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
You can put them on their plate as a parent and they won't touch them. They'll look at you like you're crazy. But if their neighbor or their friend beside them in class eats the green vegetables, then the exposure will allow them to go, oh, well, maybe it's not so bad and I'll try it.
It's like, oh, that's cool. I can't eat that.
Exactly. So, guys, if you found some of these tips, tricks, generalization to a T, well, come on back. That's what we're here for. Our goal is to make sure that you get tips and tricks for your family and your friends that you can take from our purple couch to your couch. So until next time, we'll see you again on the Purple Couch Podcast. Bye, guys.